bears some relevancy.
It does bear some relevance because we should have been doing this, like, if not last week, then, you know, I think the week before. Like, this has been a delayed episode.
Yeah.
And it's because I tried to do something with my computer myself, screwed it up, and had to take it to the shop, where they screwed something up, had to wait forever for it to get a part that got sent around the country. Like, crisscross was over in, like, Wyoming after going to Maryland. Like, it was in Maryland and then got sent to Wyoming and then got sent back to New York. And this wasn't even a part that I ordered. This wasn't anything I did. They'd broken something in the process of repairing it and fixed it. The good news is, it works like a charm now. So it's got a new motherboard and a nice solid-state hard drive. Cool. And I can start up Crusader Kings like a dream. It doesn't take 5 minutes to boot up anymore. It takes like 1. It's marvelous.
Yeah, that
I might actually be able to play Imperador. Or
SSD definitely speeds up your. I mean, I do. I might PC.
I might buy Crusader Kings 3. I might do that.
Nice.
What kind of game is that exactly? Because I've heard you reference it, and I do not know what this King Crusaders is.
Oh, it's a real time strategy game. It's like Europa Universalis. It's made by the same company. It's Paradox. Or Hearts of Iron, if you've ever heard of that.
I have heard of that.
Yeah.
I know that I'm not real big on RTS. My wife was a real big Age of Empires fan.
Oh, well, then she'd love Crusader Kings. She probably knows what Crusader Kings is. Crusader Kings is like... It's like Europa Universalis, except it's set in the Middle Ages, and instead of playing as a nation, you play as a dynasty.
Oh, she'd love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. She'd love that.
It's lots of fun.
Like, her last 2 big video game jams were, like, Diablo 2 and Age of Empires. Like,
I played a lot of Age of Empires back in the day, and I like Crusader Kings better, because... Age of Empires, kind of like Civilization, does that thing where it's like, now it's 500 years later. Okay. And now you have access to all this new technology that you did not have before. Like, okay.
And now Gandhi has nukes, and he gets...
Yeah, now Gandhi has nukes, which is fine. Gandhi can have nukes. But in Crusader Kings, you, like, watch the time go by, and after your character, that's you... lives for a certain amount of time, he dies, and you pretty much know what kills him. Somebody assassinates him, or he dies of, like, the Black Plague, which is totally a thing that happens, and or he dies in battle or something, and then you have to play as whoever your heir is, and who you hopefully have educated properly, and then you got to go through that thing where it might be a regency, and that might be a disaster, and so it's lots of fun. You can play as a bunch of historical characters.
So go through like the march of history, where in history there have been many times where the successor of a very successful ruler is nowhere near up to snuff as
that happens.
Themselves were.
In CK2, a lot of times you have a wonderful heir, and then he dies before you, and then you end up with like the spare, and he sucks. And you can play as famous characters. You can play as William the Conqueror. You can play as Charlemagne. You can be you can like pick a Byzantine emperor. Like, you can be that. But then you can, as soon as you hit unpause, history diverges according to the decisions that you make.
Yeah. Okay. Like, funny little thing, during the rule of Catherine the Great, I think she had many people claiming to be the proper ascendant to the throne of Russia, and there has apparently historically in Russia, their chain of rulership wasn't really that linearly clear.
Oh no, Russia's a nightmare.
And so you would just have people pop on the road. Well, no, I'm the proper, because I said so, and I have all this vodka.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, I guess that works.
Russia was kind of like the Byzantine Empire that way, where it's like, if people liked you well enough and you had enough of the army on your side, you could just be like, I'm the emperor now. I'm the emperor because I say so. Yeah, we don't care. Blind him. Blind him, castrate him, send him to a monastery. Does he even go here? Like, that kind of thing. That kind of thing happened. Like, there's no reason Catherine the Great should have been the Tsarina, but she was.
lot of madness involved in just the overall, just kings and kingdoms and emperors and empresses of European history. Mongolian history a little more linear and straight. Genghis Khan actually ran his empire as a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that ended up being fairly popular.
Yeah,
because he was not of great birth. Like he just wrote, he came out of pretty much like nowhere.
He built it from nothing.
He ran his shit by meritocracy.
Yeah, he built it up from nothing. Genghis Khan.
It's very interesting the different viewpoints one can get on a ruler depending on what side it's coming from. Like Genghis Khan, one of the most feared conquerors ever, but also a lot of really good ideas.
Yeah,
with ruling.
Yeah,
as far as that goes.
Yeah, the Pax Mongolica is one of the things that allowed trade to flourish in the late medieval to early modern period. Is that Silk Road the Mongols protected and gave sustenance to it. So it's one of the things that helped technology and culture and ideas spread, which is usually the result of a massive military conquest is the spread of a lot of ideas and culture and technology. That's why the Greek philosophers said war is the father of us all. I forget which one it was.
Where is that?
I forget which Greek philosopher that was. Who was that, Mike?
Michael could tell you.
Not sure, honestly.
War is the father of us all.
That's
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm going to have to look that up. That's going to drive me crazy.
I don't think that was Alexander the Great.
No. This is one of the pre-Socratics.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I keep wanting to say
that could be Heraclitus or like Thales. I'm not sure.
Yes. It was Heraclitus.
There you go. I knew you'd know it.
Yeah.
I knew you'd know it.
See, there you go. It was Heraclitus. I've been pronouncing his name wrong.
We don't actually have any fragments of we don't have any full manuscripts of his. We've only got fragments of Heraclitus left. Like, there's no full manuscripts of his, as far as we know, preserved anywhere.
That's true of a couple of the pre-Socratics.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true of, that's largely even true of Sappho of Lesbos. We've got got some fragments of a lot of her poetry, but we have, next to no historical data beyond what she refers to herself in her own poetry.
Yeah.
And that's really all we have to go on.
Everything we know about Sappho is guesswork. That's true of a lot of those poets. That's true of Homer.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some. I've heard that there is some speculation that Homer may even be fictional himself and may not have existed.
I mean, we have no copies of Homer more recent than 700 years of the time of the composition of the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Right.
We got nothing.
But there was also some speculation that Troy didn't even
the way that it's
for the longest time. And then we found Troy.
Well, I mean, that did exist.
That's true.
Yeah. There had been some scholarly speculation that it was made up as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the Iliad and the Odyssey are specifically the Odyssey, but I think this is true for the Iliad as well. The way that they're composed and the way it sounds in Greek basically gives away the fact that the way it's arranged in the stanza and the cadence that it's supposed to be recited in is basically in and of itself a mnemonic device to help you remember the poem. So if you can't hit all of the individual pieces and recite it, it was oral tradition before it was transcribed.
Exactly.
So the whole idea was that you would learn the cadence and you would learn the basic story, and if you screwed up and forgot the exact wording for parts of it, it was okay. Come up with another word or something similar to fit in, so that you could actually continue the recitation.
Yeah, that's why a lot of those lines and phrases get repeated.
Yep.
Well, this is a highfalutin beginning to a podcast. We are nailing it tonight, boys. This is amazing.
We are.
This is amazing. We're talking about ancient history and the value of war and ancient philosophers and poets. This is a really, really powerful and bougie beginning to a podcast that's going to be about the Venture Brothers and Archer.
I mean, perhaps, but
that's why we call it shallow and pedantic.
It is.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, both the Venture Brothers and Archer have a lot in common with Greek tragedies.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that statement, Kieran. You're going to have to justify that. Not right now. Like, we're going to let that proposition stand, but we're going to argue that. We're going to argue that.
Okay.
Because I'm not certain.
I am a lit major. I am prepared.
Okay, good. Good. So, this is Shallow and Pedantic, episode 10, the one that should have been before but wasn't. And
it is now.
This is February 35th.
Yes.
It's February 35th, and this is our February episode because my computer suffered the agonies of Achilles and is now functioning back and better than ever. It's been resurrected. It has come back.
Gandalf the White.
Yeah, it's Mac Mini the White. And we are going to talk about something that's sort of related to what our last episode was about. That was about anime.
Yep.
And this time we're talking about something similar. We're also talking about animation. I've been wanting to think about what the category is, and I don't want to say adult animation because that just sounds wrong.
I actually
right.
I don't want to go there.
I think I have a good title for what it is specifically. It is nostalgia-driven, pop culture influenced animation.
That's certainly a good description. Yes, that's true of both
That
of
is
these.
exactly what it is. And in order for one to have a sense of nostalgia, one has to be of a particular age.
Right. I think both of these are aimed squarely at a Generation X market.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
If not very, older millennials.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I was watching a YouTube channel. That guy who like makes drinks. It's like the How to Drink YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the one I mean. And he actually made some cocktails based on things that Rusty Venture drank on the Venture Brothers, like horrible cocktails. Like he made them and drank them, and they were indeed horrible. But he quoted somebody, a friend of his on Twitter, who said, "If you want to know what it's like being a Gen Xer, searching through the ruins of the culture your grandparents made and that your parents drove into the mountain, you will find it somewhere in season 3 of the Venture Brothers."
Yeah, that's
is quite possibly the best tweet of all time, at least in my opinion, because that's a nailed it kind of thing. I wish I could find that and like it and retweet it, but it's not to be. But yeah, both of these shows are aimed at people who remember the Cold War and could possibly have understood, there's a lot of very, low-key references to things. Like, you have to know who Lydia Lunch is. And if you don't know who Lydia Lunch is, there's going to be just references and things that are going to fly past your head. And you might not enjoy Venture Brothers as much as you did if you were younger.
Right.
Yeah, you have to have been alive in the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
And it's also like they're both very they're both essentially parodies, right?
Yes.
Like there's a lot of stuff that they're doing a send up of in a lot of different, in quite a few different ways.
It's parody, but
so
it's
I think
not
it's
satire.
Most definitely.
Right. It's parody. Yeah.
They're lovingly recreating something.
The Venture Brothers,
but they're not it's not pure mockery of the thing. It's just like turning it on its head.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, for instance, C-Lab 2021 would be a satire of the C-Lab 2020 cartoon.
Yes.
Harvey Birdman is a satire of Birdman, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
Yes, I agree with that. Whereas Venture Brothers,
I do not know where Space Ghost Coast to Coast falls in as compared to Space Ghost. It's not really a satire of that cartoon in so much as it's reformatting the characters in a different type of entertainment.
Yeah, Space Ghost Coast to Coast isn't even a satire. It's like it almost exists in a tangential universe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't even know how you could do that.
It's a late night TV talk show.
Yeah.
They're using cartoon characters for it, yeah.
It's more like Comedy Bang Bang than like anything else that we're talking about. Whereas
that's accurate, yeah.
For Venture Brothers, to really get the joke, you've got to have at least, some familiarity with the concept of Johnny Quest.
Oh, yeah.
And what that is. Even if you never watched any of it, you have to, be aware of the concept. It's like, here's boy adventurer going off doing boy adventure things in a plane with his dad and a bodyguard and his best friend, and they go do cool things and have adventures and, do, Indiana Jones stuff. And this happens on a weekly basis.
Very pulpy cartoon.
Very pulpy. And for kids. And, the whole concept of it falls apart upon examination, which is really what Venture Brothers does. It's like you introduce that poison of realism to the Johnny Quest world, and you have the Venture Brothers.
Yep.
But again, it's a parody of it, but it's also it's a parody with a certain amount of love.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
It's not for everything that gets sent up. The reality of that is not something that's being mocked. It's almost like an homage to a purer time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Other thing is that also Venture Brothers, as the creators said, is it started out, the basis is Johnny Quest, but then they end up sending up a lot of other pop culture, the significance of David Bowie to the Venture Brothers.
Right. There's a whole lot of... Yeah, that's the kind of thing where if you're of a younger age, you're just not going to get it. That whole cliffhanger episode revolves around David Bowie and Iggy Pop and Klaus
Nomi.
Klaus
Nomi. Yep.
If you grew up in the 90s, you're not going to get any of that. Who's Iggy Pop? I don't understand.
Right. my favorite part about the end of season 2 of Venture Brothers is every line that comes out of Iggy Pop's mouth is just Stooges lyrics.
They're just Stooges lyrics.
he never actually says any of his own dialogue. It's just Stooges lyrics the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's brilliant.
What was that episode with they introduced the pirate? The very beginning of it has it's space oddity. Just ground control to Major Tom. Just spoken out in lines.
You're gonna crash the TVC-15. Yeah. That's actually first season, I think.
Yeah.
That's first
season.
Take your protein pill and put your helmet on.
Yeah. There you go, man. Direct to a lot of pop culture references from a majority of sources. I mean, they go in and They eventually lampoon the Bionic Man, the $6 Million Man. They lampoon.
Yep. God, I remember that.
G.I. Joe and Cobra.
Yeah.
Totally. They lampoon Hunter S. Thompson. Jesus.
Now that's a loving homage.
That is a very. It's all loving. They lampoon it, but they love the hell. They go on to later lampoon superheroes.
Oh yeah. That kind of takes over in the later seasons. I personally am not caught up on Venture Brothers. It's been shoved into the grave right now, and it may or may not return. There's rumors, but it's been put out to pasture at Comedy Central, Adult Swim, where it had a home for a long time. After the 4th season, though, it was kind of a lot of on and off. They were gone, and then they were back, and then they were gone. It was that thing where it's a lot of short episodes, or a lot of short seasons.
Yeah.
If you look at season 1, season 2 of Venture Brothers, it's 22 episodes, and then you start getting into those 13-episode seasons. It was a lot like Community.
Yeah.
where like the first 3 seasons had 22 episodes, and then everything after that was like 13 episodes.
And, Rick and Morty kind of similar to that too, and the longer episodes for the first 2 seasons, longer seasons for the first 2 seasons, and then the third and fourth much shorter seasons.
So yeah, there's definitely they love the pop culture references. They love the lampooning. They knew who their audience is, but like that's like everybody does that now. So. Yeah. That's not really what's remarkable about the Venture Brothers. What's remarkable about the Venture Brothers is that it's actually aimed at a Gen X audience, because who does that?
Yeah.
With both of these, it's not just about the references. They're there for the audience to get them, but they're very low key, and they just kind of, it's under the radar. It's not really the central thing. So, like, I think for both of these jokes, both of these shows rather, we need to establish what the joke is, because these are both comedies. And I would venture to say that they're both character-driven comedies.
They are.
Like all true comedy, the best part of it is driven by the character. And what about the character is ridiculous. And so for both of these, I think there's an ensemble at work. It's character-driven comedy. And that's what enabled it to really find an audience. Like the pop culture.
It also uses, I feel, one of the true sources of comedy. And I can't remember where this quote. I'm misquoting something terribly, so I can't even attribute to it too. But essentially, it was essentially said that comedy is born out of pain.
Yes.
Comedy is, and there is a lot of pain to be found in both the Venture Brothers and in Archer.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. There's pain in both, and that pain is made for laughs. I think that's even more on the nose when it comes to Archer.
Oh, yeah.
With Venture Brothers, they're a little more subtle about the pain, and the joke, I would say, for Venture Brothers, and you can tell me if you think this is right, is the joke is that when Johnny Quest grows up, he's not good at anything.
Right.
Johnny Quest grew up, and like he's kind of like a child star grown up, and like he's not cute anymore, because that's the main character.
You're like Danny Bonaducci.
You're Danny Bonaducci, and he's Thaddeus. Rusty Venture used to be a big deal when he was like globe-trotting around the world with his dad, who was a super scientist, and he was Johnny Quest. He was, even though there's actually a Johnny Quest in the Venture Brothers universe. Action Johnny, who even looks like a grown-up Johnny Quest, except he's a drug addict. He's even more the John. He's even more so. But Thaddeus S. Rusty Venture, he's supposed to be a super scientist, and he didn't even get a degree. He sucks at science. He's not good at anything. He's a 43-year-old, miserable, skinny-armed, noodle-armed dork. And he's only carrying the legacy of his dad, who was actually a super scientist. And he's got 2 idiot sons. And he's carrying on a tradition that he's incapable of carrying on. Because he's incompetent.
Ill-equipped, certainly.
Yeah.
Ill-equipped, and he knows it.
And so
he doesn't...
What does he do? That's the joke. Like, Thaddeus Rusty Venture's incompetence is the joke that kind of informs everything. There's other things in there that are funny, but that's the thing that the show keeps rotating around, because first 3 seasons were very much Johnny Quest parodies. And, you know, they would go off in the Venture jet, and they would have weird adventures. The X1 or whatever it's called. And then after, like, the 3rd season, they took a hard left turn and started doing a bunch of other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of from, like, season 4 on that so much of it just sort of hinges on Rusty not really being able to do anything, like, successfully. He tries a couple of different things throughout the successive seasons to try to, make it big or, to succeed, essentially. And he keeps getting chances to try to do stuff, and he just, like, screws it up every time.
Every time.
and interestingly enough, as you go on in the seasons, you learn more about his father Jonas' venture, and you find out Jonas, kind of a tremendous asshole.
Yeah, he definitely
Like,
was flawed.
Like, not a good person at even vaguely all, but he had really good marketing and PR.
Yeah, he was. He was good at what he knew how to do, but that didn't make him a good person.
No.
You know,
Right.
it's like Miles Davis was an amazing musician who changed the face of music 5 or 6 times. You didn't want to be married to the guy,
Yeah.
or have him for a dad. You didn't want that.
That's
Jonas
true.
Venture is kind of like that. Like, he was, great marketing. He was good at being a super scientist, whatever that actually means. Not a good dad.
No.
Not a good
And,
dad.
and funnily enough, you don't even have
No.
even a vague notion of who Rusty's mother is.
I was just thinking about that a couple of days ago.
Not even a vague notion. Like, he had one.
He clearly had one. It's a running joke that we don't really know who Hank and Dean
Mother is.
is. Like, that's a running joke of the show, but, Rusty's mother is never even mentioned as an entity that existed.
Yeah.
She is not discussed.
No, not even. I can't remember, like, if she's even ever pictured or if any pictures of
No,
her as a
I've seen
child.
the whole thing, and you never find out. Like, I don't think you ever actually find out who she is.
Yeah.
Like, you know who the monarch's mother is and father, but
I don't think I've gotten that far. I'm somewhere in season 6.
keep watching. You'll
All right.
what I have said will make greater sense. I'm only into a very early part of season 7, but which
They tied up a lot of loose ends. Like there's not like at the end of season 7, there's not too much left. Dangling.
So they needed a few more episodes, like maybe one more half season to wrap everything up nice and neat, and they're not going to get it.
Probably.
I mean, it's I'll reserve judgment. I'm not going to say one way or the other. I think it's I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but it's definitely worth seeing. They were definitely in this. I think in season 6 and 7, trying to sort of wrap up some loose ends in terms of the plot, some of the characters. There's definitely some resolving of things that had been on the table for a while for prior seasons.
It's kind of interesting that you don't really get much character development on Hank and Dean for a while till you find out they're clones, and then they get character development at that point. They change at that point.
Yeah. Hank and Dean's character development is one of the slow burns of the show, especially Hank.
Yeah.
Hank doesn't seem to get very much shredded at all. Dean seems to have more character development because he's the smarter one.
Yeah.
And he had this romantic attachment in the first 3 seasons that when that went where the only place it could go, which is nowhere, forced him emotionally to grow up a little bit.
Yep.
And so he's had some development, whereas Hank still seems kind of weirdly childlike.
Yeah.
And I don't know how far they've gotten.
Hank also got his memory wiped.
Right.
He deliberately had his own memory wiped after he lost his virginity.
Right.
To his half brother's mother.
Right, I forgot about that.
Dermot's mother, yeah. I can't remember what her name. Nikki something, but yeah.
Right, Dermot is also is he also Rusty's son? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about Dermot.
Yep.
Dermot, who, unlike the other 2 Venture brothers, fucking Brock wants to fucking kill.
Right.
Brock cannot stand Dermot.
We should spend some time and talk about Brock Sampson.
We should.
Yes.
He, I think, gets the most character development in it.
Brock Sampson is kind of like he's the Fonz of Venture Brothers.
He is.
He's a throwaway character that kind of took over the show.
It's true.
He's like this giant beast of a man, and he's just like this murderous, super secret agent who is really into Led Zeppelin and
muscle cars.
And muscle cars, and he seems he's fearless and zen, and doesn't seem to be bothered by much of anything. He only ever shows weakness in his romantic attachments, which are both to, like, Amazon warrior women.
Yeah.
So you have to respect him for that. Like, I definitely like Molotov cocktease better than the
Hilarious
one.
name.
Loved Molotov cocktease. Like,
Yeah.
A, great name. B, really interesting character that they played off each other very well. They were kind of equal to each other in their rage and frustration and their desire for one another, and they were on opposite sides. That's a through line running through both of these shows. Both of these shows are shows in which the Cold War never ended.
Yeah.
Like, the Soviet Union still exists. And that's definitely a piece of nostalgia, because the Cold War was obviously a time when the world made sense in a Manichaean way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's this or that. There's not a lot of, when your choices are one or the other, and there's not any in between. Like, it's,
A lot of Boolean / binary choices going on there, and not all these shades of gray.
Yeah, not all the shades of gray. So that's definitely, they know their audience by pitching it to that, because that was definitely something we remembered and grew up with, even if it didn't have the same effect on us as it did in our parents' generation.
Brock, Brock is an interesting character because he definitely cares for the boys and looks after them, but he's also, at least when they were cloned and transferred over, not as so much trying to protect them as he was after there were no more clones.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of having clones, and that was one of the great jokes of the show. It's like, you get to the end of season 1, the boys are killed in a
la Easy Rider,
in a very obvious reference to Easy Rider. Again, if you're a millennial, you're not going to get that.
Maybe that's why the first Ghost Rider movie didn't do that well, because it had a lot of calls back to Easy Rider.
Exactly,
it did, yeah.
And so they're killed, and the throwaway scene that always has the darkest joke in the episode, which is after the credits, the throwaway scene at the end, like the original post-credit scene, has just Rusty saying, "All right, get their clothes," and that's it, with no emotion. And that's the end of the first season. You're like, what the
fuck?
Is this man a monster? What is his deal? Yes, because he just creates clones of his children.
Yep.
Via their DNA, and just when they get killed, which apparently happens a lot, because he's not actually a good father.
No.
He just hatches another clone, and so, like, they celebrate their 16th birthday, even though they're actually, like, 19.
Yeah.
And he justifies it completely. It's like, look, if you had a stupid kid, or a kid with a weak skull, you'd make him wear a helmet. If you have death-prone children, you make sure you have clones. I'm being a good dad here, damn it.
And it's not like Brock is going to disagree with him, but Brock's moral compass, well, he's got a license to kill that he occasionally has to get renewed, you know?
Yeah, that was a good episode. That was a good episode. What's the matter? You don't like Zeppelin?
It's about love and lost and... Okay, and hobbits.
And hobbits. What happened to that robot?
Helper?
What happened to Helper? I haven't seen Helper in forever.
No, Helper's still around.
Helper's still around.
Yeah, but like Brock Samson is heroic because no one else in this show is heroic. Rusty's not heroic. The Hank and Dean Venture are both like idiots.
Numbnuts, yeah.
Yeah, they have no idea what's going on. It's not their fault. That's the thing. It's not their fault.
And friggin' Dr. Orpheus is like a theater sorcerer. I mean, I swear to God. He's a fucking sorcerer that went to theater classes because there's no other explaining his flair for the dramatic.
His daughter is the most sensible person on the show for the first couple of seasons.
The Alchemist, actually.
That's true,
Order of the Triad, the Alchemist is pretty sensible as well.
And the Alchemist is sensible, but also, like, also theatrical in his own way.
Well, yes.
This is also true.
As is Shore Leave.
So the first, 3 seasons are pretty much in that Johnny Quest box. And then they branch out. And the Venture Brothers, you were talking about tying up loose ends. earlier, and I would say that there were a lot of loose ends to tie up. Because one of the things Venture Brothers was really good at is creating a bunch of like secondary characters that were so incredibly likable that they kept like wanting to explore them until you get to the beginning of season 6 and whole scenes and episodes can go by and you barely see Hank and Dean Venture, the titular Venture Brothers.
Right. No, and I mean, one of the things that I think that particular show did really well, and I'll actually say, all the way to the end of season 7, like, they brought out all of these characters, and you had all of these different plot threads happening, and they actually did an amazing job of keeping it all straight. There was, like, no, paradoxes or contradictions.
No, they kept continuity very well.
Yeah, it's very, like... That is not an easy thing to do, and I mean, especially for most seasons in between them, you would have some kind of a special that would essentially move things forward, or that would wrap some stuff up or set some things up for the next season.
Happy Halloween, Hank.
Right. Well, that's all this in Gargantua too. I still think is still like the best special they ever did. That was an amazing That was a great what was it, like an hour-long episode or something. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, one of the characters who, as far as I can tell, never really had much in the way of actual change or character development, it would be Dr. Venture. Like, Rusty doesn't really change very much throughout the entirety of the series.
No, the show kind of happens around him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even his arch nemesis, the Monarch, has actually a lot of character development.
Yeah, we figure out... The Monarch goes through a lot of arcs, and we figure out who the Monarch is.
Right.
And what drives him. And that's interesting to find out. But Rusty Venture is kind of like the storm of the hurricane, or the eye of the hurricane. Like, he's the one in the middle. The show happens around him, and he doesn't change a whole lot. He's the Jerry Seinfeld of the show.
Yeah.
And a lot of those characters that get brought around and danced around, they're all incredibly likable, but you get to the beginning of season 6, and I start to lose interest because I have no idea what really is happening. And I have a really hard time caring about what's going on with the League of Calamitous Intent. Like, I get it, the dudes have 2 heads, it's funny, but I don't need to see them every episode.
They do make a pretty funny pop culture reference in when Rusty gets captured by the guild at the nightclub, and they pop up. It's like, ass to ass! Like, I'm not with him!
Yeah. It's good, but it starts to take over the story, and like the whole story seems to be about the Guild of Calamitous Intent. And I myself liked it better when we didn't really know much about the Guild, when they were kind of mysterious.
And, Brock just says, they're one of the few organizations I still respect.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I like that.
Clean.
And then I've watched them like go through them, and they're not competent or worthy of respect. They're also clowns.
But who is in Venture Brothers? Who really? All right, Brock is competent, but even he doesn't win 100% of the time. Like,
nobody
still takes his lumps.
Brock takes his lumps. Yeah,
he takes his lumps. He wins more than most on that show, but ultimately, I'd say that show is about failure.
Well, and that was on one of the audio tracks, commentary tracks. I forget which of the writers said it, but he was like, if I can get big picture for a moment here, this show is about failure. It's it's about like this sort of this build up of the golden age of science, and then how it just kind of never really materialized and fell away, and it just hasn't happened.
Why aren't we on the moon?
Right, right. Why don't we have a moon base? Why don't we have jetpacks? All of this stuff was supposed to happen already,
Yeah.
So it's the big picture. The whole one of the unifying themes of the whole show was, according to the creators, was failure.
The death of jet punk.
Yeah.
The death of jet punk and the grimy reality in which we're forced to actually live.
The The death of the utopia, I would say.
Yeah.
And
Sure, absolutely.
I would say very much right now we were definitely living in a dystopia the past 4 years. That's for goddamn sure. But we're kind of in a dystopian situation now.
What you mean were, Kieran?
Things have.
Am I supposed to be happy now because the cyberpunk dystopia won out over the Cheeto Emperor, or the cyberpunk oligarchy? I'm sorry, that's what I mean.
We still have
the cyberpunk oligarchy.
We still have a shit sandwich to eat, man. It just helps when you got a little bread with it.
I mean, you can. It doesn't matter. We're still bombing Syria.
I mean,
that's still happening.
What's really changed? But that's a whole other topic.
That is another topic, but I could answer that succinctly. I'm not utterly, completely embarrassed whenever I hear certain people talk on the TV.
Well, why would you listen to people talk on the TV? That's your loss right there.
Oh, YouTube in my case, but I watch news, man. I have to keep.
That's your mistake, Kieran. Don't watch the news.
No, you got to watch several different sources to try to glean some sort of actual reality. Out of the made-up media.
No. If you add lies and have more lies, and then season those lies with lies, you just have a plate full of lies. But again. That's a whole other topic of conversation.
Man, you love shitting in my sandwich. But no.
Where were we?
we were about the death of the utopia.
The death of utopia.
Yeah,
yes.
death of utopia.
Death of the utopia. That is exactly where we were at. Interesting enough, though, if we might do, though we haven't gotten Archer at all yet. Really.
Well, I wanted to do one and then do the other. But that's fine.
I would like to make a comment about art styles because that's
let's do that.
So, Venture Brothers is very much in the Hanna-Barbera, Johnny Quest era of art. It's very kind of flat, rough around the edges kind of art. I mean, it gets a little more polished as time goes by. But it's still that very stylized kind of.
It looks like a cartoon, and it acts like a cartoon.
Archer is in the style of the '80s artist Nagal, who used to do you see his prints all up at freaking hair salons all the damn time because he did this really chic, stylized, clean vector drawings of people.
Yes,
and Archer is much closer to that. I wouldn't say they're trying to ape that style per se, but it is a very close parallel. And again, children of the 80s, children of the Cold War, that style is going to, ping just as well as the Johnny Quest style.
Archer aims at a realism that Venture Brothers has nothing to do with.
Sure.
But a very stylized realism.
Yeah,
a chic.
It's a stylized realism, but it's like everything that happens on Archer is more or less plausible. And they don't really give a damn about that in Venture Brothers.
I don't know the amount of cocaine that Pam ends up doing. That's not a plausible amount to not die from.
We'll get into Pam in a minute.
Phrasing. No, anyway, no.
Are we not doing phrasing?
We are totally doing phrasing. We're totally doing phrasing.
To quote Rick James, cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Hell of a drug. And we are absolutely doing phrasing. And Venture Brothers is cartoonish and intended to be a cartoon because it's intended to harken back to that innocence that is now poisoned. And it's
tarnished, at least.
Tarnished, yeah. Even though I would argue that there's a measure of innocence being carried forward in the titular Venture Brothers, Hank and Dean, who are wide-eyed innocents. And that's one of the things that gives the show its humanity.
Yeah.
Because, grown-up Rusty is cynical and has very few ethical encumbrances. Brock Sampson is a killer.
Yeah.
Everyone else is some form of villain or incompetent, but Hank and Dean are wide-eyed innocents, and there's a certain extent to which everyone seems to want to protect their innocence. Like, say what you will about Thaddeus Venture as a dad, he's not very good at keeping those boys alive, but boy howdy, he protects their innocence. and they
He
are
does,
not
he does.
to the extent, to the best that he can. He's a good dad that way.
To the extent that they don't know who their mother is. And even weirdly enough, the third Venture brother, Dermot, even he has a kind of innocence. He just tries to pretend that he isn't.
Right. He's pretty much a standard teenager, Dermot is. And Hank and Dean are not. No. It's about, it's about Rusty's failure.
But then again...
But it's not about him being evil. He's not really evil. He's just kind of incompetent and, ethically shaky.
He's just trying to figure out how to get through life.
He's trying to figure out how to get through life. He's not monomaniacal or ambitious. He's not trying to rule the world. He just wants to find his place in it. And
it's kind of funny because if you look at it, his best years were when he was a child, because he starts going bald in college.
Yeah, right?
Right.
He does start going bald in college, and he has to make that character change, and he's pretty much the same guy that he was in college. It's kind of astounding, really, to be so stuck for so long.
When you even have the characters of the Billy the Quiz Boy and White, who are like his college roommates, essentially, they comment on the fact that he's pretty much the same guy, since they were in college, like 20 plus years like prior. And I don't know, just watching the show, I always felt like Rusty he sort of went from like trying to come up with his own inventions and like his own sort of enterprises to basically just sort of humping the corpse of everything that his dad built.
Yeah.
And then he can't even really successfully monetize that.
No.
And it's so like once again, failure
all around. And because you can perceive failure from a wide enough distance, and because the characters are able to comment on failure, or at least each other's failure, with a certain amount of ironic distance, it creates comedy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and also the way nonsensical things seem to happen. Just like that's where the joke is known, and what could be tragic and sad becomes hilarious.
You know who else doesn't fail nearly as much on the show besides Brock? Dr. the Mrs. Monarch.
Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, who's ruthlessly competent in her own way. Far more so than her husband, and she's rewarded for that by becoming a powerful person in the League of Calamitous Intent. But also kind of like Brock Sampson, like, I don't know, with Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, I can't tell. Like, emotionally, she doesn't seem to change all that much. Like, she's competent and rewarded for her competence, but she's still, she's still very much attached to the Monarch.
Mm-hmm. But they did go through a period of separation and rough times, and
I kind of see that happening in season 6. That's a thing. There's some back and forth about that. That's true.
I think the
early on, like season 1 when she left him, or season 2 when she left him to go be back with Phantom Limb for a little bit.
Oh right, Phantom Limb. I forgot about that. It's been so long since I've watched the early episodes of this.
Yeah, in which like season 1 and season 2 introduced probably what I think is one of the funnier characters, King Gorilla.
Oh right, King Gorilla.
King Gorilla.
I forgot about that. I forgot that whole arc where the Monarch went to jail.
He was in prison. Yeah, the Monarch was in prison. Like that was like the last episode of season 1. Like, what's your name? Yeah, your name's Bitch, and I just sold it to King Gorilla for a cigarette. Like,
I don't even smoke.
You're Hank Bridger. Give it back. Here's your cigarette back. Yeah, fuck you. Give me $1.
Yeah. The Monarch is hilarious because he's obsessed with one thing, and he can't let that thing go. He's the Ahab of the show. He hates Rusty Venture for reasons that are never fully explained. Or at least haven't been at my part. Maybe by the time I get to the end of the show, they'll be explained.
7 gives a little bit of a notion.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a vibe of it, but it's never fully explained, and I don't want it. I don't need it to be that far explained. It can exist in the shadows. But his comedy is that he's so obsessed in a Ahab kind of way with someone who's absolutely not worth the aggravation. And
in all honesty, is barely even acknowledges the Monarch's existence for the most. Like, oh, great, that prick at my base again, causing the trouble.
Yeah. Like, Venture doesn't care. Venture doesn't care.
It is one-sided arching.
It's a one-sided arching. Venture doesn't care. The Monarch's obsessed, and there's even that. I forget which season it was where the Monarch and Dr. Girlfriend. She was Dr. Girlfriend then. Broke into the lab, and even the Monarch says, "What could I even do to this guy that life hasn't already done to him?" And he has this moment of, what am I wasting my life on? He recovers, of course, because he's the Monarch. And, by the end of the episode is right back to his Ahabness. But, that's the center of it. And then there's also all these other wonderful secondary characters that are fun to hang out with, but they kind of, shove in on the pitch. And I think that's one of the reasons that, Hank and Dean Venture don't get the character development they need, is because we have to talk about we have to hang out with Agents 21 and 24. And why would you not want to hang out with Agents 21 and 24? Because they're amazing. Henchmen 21 and 24.
Amazing development in
right,
characters.
Yeah. Henchmen 21. I said Agents.
I mean, we know what you meant.
I know it. I should drink
Yes,
more.
you did. But that is semantics. And we are not semantic and shallow and semantic. We are shallow and pedantic.
That's a stretch, Karen, but I'm going to allow it.
Well, of course.
All right. So that's my criticism of the show, is that they let all the other secondary characters take over, and so I kind of find myself saying, how come they don't get on the X1 and go places anymore? Yeah, that's kind of the vibe.
Probably because they crashed it somewhere. I mean,
and it's on the one hand, it's good to have that development, but on the other hand, it kind of changes the whole structure of the show, and I don't know where it is. Maybe I just need to finish watching it, because I do kind of enjoy it, so I just probably need to finish.
I feel like, but here's the thing. While, it is definitely fun to have them on the X1 going off and doing all these adventures and shit like that, you can only do that so many times before it becomes lather, rinse, repeat, and becomes stale. So you need to have change. You need to have development. You need to have, focus on other characters to prevent Hank and Dean from becoming overly stale.
You're not wrong. I agree with you.
Without change, you have stagnation, and nothing kills a good TV show worse than stagnation or jumping the shark.
Yeah, and that's definitely what happened to Community. Was to go back to that was killed by stagnation. They refused to let the characters develop, and so it got really tired in the latter seasons.
Maintaining the status quo is not healthy for any franchise.
No, it's not. It's not. You have to have some change, but you got to be careful about the change, because if you completely undo everything, then you lose the thing that you liked in the first place.
Yeah,
it's a delicate balancing act. So maybe I should finish watching it before I make that judgment. Whereas I'm entirely caught up on Archer.
Excellent.
That has a different dynamic entirely.
That is true.
We could start talking about Archer if that's good with you guys.
Now Archer.
Yeah.
Archer, I would state, is also kind of about failure.
Not quite as on the nose, but
Not as on the nose, but
a different kind of failure.
We have Sterling Archer, who is probably the world's shittiest spy.
Yeah.
I disagree.
But he is definitely more competent than the everyman.
Yeah, he is. We were to talk about the joke. The joke for me in Archer is that Sterling Archer is a sociopath, but because he's almost preternaturally good at certain aspects of his job, he will never pay a price for this. Like, as he himself says, I pretty much lurched from one firing offense to the other. And
well, it doesn't hurt his mother is his boss.
Well, his mother's his boss, but that also creates problems for him as well. Like,
it does.
And Sterling Archer is the guy who refuses to do the reading.
Yeah.
But he knows perfectly well that when things go pear-shaped, he can shoot his way out. And he will, and he does. And he's almost heroic when he does that. Like, his ability to find, like, just like, I'm gonna, like, rampage my way through this problem, and it works for him every time. And then he laughs. And that's the joke. It's like, this guy's never gonna develop, because he doesn't really have to. He's found his niche. And, and also, the other reason, like, he never has to develop is that everyone around him is warped in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not really the problem character. They kind of addressed that in the last season, where they kind of like, he is a spy in a private spy agency, and that's run by his mom, who used to be CIA, and they have also dealings with the CIA that are incredibly complicated in seasons 5 and 6. And then he goes into a coma, and he's been in a coma for 3 seasons, which is just the most ridiculous classic TV trope.
Very true, Dallas.
But they made something out of it. They did something interesting with it, which is to say, like, the last 3 seasons before this last one, seasons like 7, 8, and 9, were all like Archer hallucinating while in his coma. And him...
Right.
You and I, we started watching the first season of this together, Mike. When you were
it was it was Dreamland.
Dreamland, which
yeah,
is
I've seen.
But he's hallucinating, and he meets the same characters that you know, all the characters from the show that you all know and love, and they're all like arranged slightly differently, but they're all the same characters doing the same thing. And so it's kind of like the show being like, you know what, we don't care about the main plot anymore. Let's just hang out with these characters and watch them be ridiculous. And that's because that's where the essence of the comedy is. Now that I don't think that worked as well in like the space season, the Archer 19.
Yeah, was that 8 or 9? I forget.
That was 9, Archer 1999.
Okay,
and that wasn't as funny. That was a little too far removed.
Okay,
and I don't think that the Danger Island season was good, but the Dreamland episode where Archer is basically a noir story. He's a gumshoe and he's trying to solve his partner's murder. It worked because it was a good way of saying goodbye to that character of Archer's valet, whom he tortured. Woodhouse, whom he tortured. And that never stopped being funny. I have to go make an old man eat a whole bunch of spider webs. Again, he's a sociopath, but it doesn't matter. Because who around him is any better? His mother's kind of a sociopath too, and everyone else.
I would say, is worse.
Yeah, and
like, I have a sense that at least Archer is going to end up treating his daughter a lot better than he got treated by his mother.
If he gets a chance to.
Granted,
which is a whole other thing, because he has the child with Lana, who's his on-again, off-again love interest, who's also hilarious in her own way. And, you love the characters on this show. This is even more character-driven, I think, than Venture Brothers, and it's like this very tight ensemble. And no character on Archer is pure of heart or without selfishness. No character is totally competent or totally incompetent. Like, Archer is himself incompetent about a great many things, but if people need to get killed, Archer is amazing. He's your guy.
The man can say a prayer to the Bloody Mary, okay?
He can. And every character gets their zingers in, and every character gets dumped on. So there's a wonderful equality to it. Like, there's not somebody who's always in the barrel. Like, even Cyril gets to have his zingers.
That's true.
And gets to be good at stuff.
I mean, it's shit. Cheryl gets to be good at stuff.
Cheryl gets to be good at stuff, and she's undergone several psychotic breaks, I'm positive. I'm
Oh,
positive.
I guarantee it.
You're not my supervisor! And that's the other thing about Archer is, like, it is the source of so many wonderful memes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so many wonderful catchphrases. It is the catchphrase show. You find yourself quoting it for like phrasing.
Is nobody doing phrasing?
Are we not doing phrasing anymore?
Phrasing. We're still doing phrasing.
We're still doing phrasing.
No, it's a great show for one-liners. There's just, there's so many.
Also, there's quite a bit of a cast crossover from Arrested Development.
Yes, there is some crossover from Arrested Development.
You know, Archer is nowhere near all over the place as, though mind you, I'm not caught up, as Adventure Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely, like, the cocaine season was hilarious.
Archer Vice, yeah, that was pretty funny.
Archer Vice was pretty funny.
Yeah, right after season 4, they just started every season has a theme. It was like Archer Vice, and then Archer PI, and then they did the
Is it like Dreamland?
Dreamland and Danger Island and Archer 1999, which were the when he was in a coma. Those were the coma seasons.
Right.
And the most recent season is Archer's awake from his coma, and now he's got to reintegrate himself back into ISIS, the spy agency that he works for. And things have gone on without him for 3 years while he's been in a coma, and everyone's really functioning well without him. And then he shows up, and then the old dynamic reemerges, and they all become their horrible incompetents. Because Archer's back, and he just imposes the dynamic that he used to have with them.
So, but Archer Vice is canon. Like, it actually happened. It
No,
wasn't
yeah. Only the only coma seasons are 7, 8, and 9, which is Dreamland, Danger Island, and Archer 1999.
Okay.
Everything else is canon. Although canonicity doesn't really matter because the setup of this is inherently ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
As with Venture Brothers, the Cold War never ended. There's a private spy agency, which is ridiculous because why would that be allowed to exist?
Right.
And I think in season 4 they actually go there with it, and that's kind of why the Archer Vice thing happens, because they have to find another way to make money because they can't function as a private spy agency anymore. So it's let's sell cocaine. Oh, we're bad at this too. And
Well, it doesn't help when you have one of your members eating it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and that's because that's Pam. Pam cannot control her appetites.
Well, it's both Archer and the Venture Brothers have Bionic Man references.
Yes.
There's pretty extensive in Archer, actually.
Yes, the Archer's nemesis, Barry.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Barry. Every time Barry shows up, I'm so happy. And the more psycho Barry gets, the better I like it. Especially when he starts talking to himself.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey Barry, what do you think, Other Barry?"
Yes. Are we gonna go kill Archer? Yes, we are, Other Barry. Yes, we are. What's going on in that guy's head? Although they do kind of finally move past that in the new season.
Oh, okay.
They started to move past it in the PI season out in Los Angeles because you can only do that for so long of having Barry not kill Archer.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to put a fork in it and do something else. And with one of the things I like about Archer is the fact that it's as I said before, is the realism of this. Espionage, especially private espionage, whatever that would mean. This is not a profession that attracts normal, healthy people.
No.
No, I mean, it's that great quote from the end of Spy Who Came In From the Cold. What the hell do you think spies are? Moral philosophers measuring everything against the word of God or Karl Marx? They're little men, they're drunkards, queers, henpecked husbands, civil service playing cowboys and Indians. So, it makes sense that these people are all damaged.
Yeah.
In fact, the scientist is he's a Hitler
Krieger.
clone.
Yeah.
Krieger.
It was a Boys of Brazil situation.
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, and then they actually went to South America, and I was like, oh, they really are doing. I was like, because they had kind of hinted at it in prior seasons, and then they just were like, oh no.
No, Krieger's one of the boys from Brazil. Like, this is happening.
We're just like, oh no.
There were other Kriegers.
Funny.
There were other Kriegers, and then he killed them, and it was amazing.
It's so funny.
Yeah. Krieger's, like, that's a classic hit. Like, here's a guy who's a crazy mad scientist who works for a private spy agency. Of course he's going to be nuts. They're all nuts. They're all damaged. And again, they all wryly comment on each other's damage, and what should be horrific becomes hilarious. And like Seinfeld, no one ever learns. No one learns. No one gets better.
No.
I think the reason they did those coma episodes, or they keep, like, changing the scenario, is because I don't think they actually know how to let these characters develop.
Oh, no. Well, and it's... yeah, and I think there was a certain amount of... they were going to have to kind of change the dynamic between Lana and Archer and actually have them develop a lot more as characters once, they had the baby. And they were like, no, I think that's probably going to kill the show. So they, like...
Yeah.
had to go and sort of do the coma episodes and do some other things to try to keep it fresh.
Yeah, I think if they let Sterling Archer grow too much, you have to. It's like Hank and Dean Venture. You have to do it a little bit at a time, or else it, like you said, it kills the show. The way the last season of the last episode of the last season ended, you do see Archer get a little bit of self-awareness in a very Archer way, because they all comment on the fact that we all had, like, our lives in order and were functional, and then you came back. And he's like, yeah, pretty much. Pam's stuffing her face again. Cyril's a wuss again. Lana, you were an absolute bitch to your friend over there for no reason. Yeah. I think, did it ever occur to you that you used me as an excuse to be your worst selves? Oh, and by the way, I just saved the world. How many times did you do that while I was in a coma? By the way, the answer is 0 times.
Nice.
And that is always Archer's saving grace. He's always able to pull absolute defeat. He's always able to pull victory out of the jaws of absolute defeat. And so he gets a pass for all of his monstrosities.
It is true.
Yeah. And
what it comes down to is Archer is great in a crisis, but cannot function in quiet stability.
He cannot. He's the crisis management guy, and he's kind of like if he was more developed, he would become Brock Samson. But Brock Samson is defined by loyalty, and Archer doesn't do loyalty. So
that is true. No.
He's going to have to grow a little bit more to develop some, like, actual spiritual virtue, and I think you can't do that and keep the comedy of the show.
No, I agree.
And Archer also, he has a number, like, he has about as bad of a relationship with his mother as Rusty had with his father.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And
you don't know who Archer's father is either.
Yeah, and the jokes about that. It could be several men.
Yep.
Mallory Archer doesn't even know who the father is. She has a couple of ideas. She might have avenged her Archer's dead father in one of my favorite episodes. The one where there's a dead guy wrapped up in a rubber suit.
Yeah.
Which is just a wonderful bottle episode where people keep showing up. It's like, why is this happening? And
I kind of like the episode when they ended up in the Vatican.
That was okay. That was
kind of funny.
They could make Pope jokes. That was okay, but I
also liked the Dodge Charger one where Archer gets the spy car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much did Dodge kick in for this? Not as much as you'd think.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful wryness to the show where, like, characters are angry or sardonic or completely given over to their passions, and that's pretty much it. And in any scene, there's one person who's angry, one person who's sardonic, and one person who's totally obsessed with something, and that's always a good recipe for humor.
I dare say, though, every member of ISIS is prone towards alcoholism.
Oh, yeah.
Every single one of them drinks.
Yeah, but I don't think Lana drinks that much.
I mean, maybe.
But then again, I'd have to rewatch it. Lana Kane is funny because she's almost the most competent person in the room. But she still can't do everything by herself. And she needs Archer and hates that she needs Archer and can't ever get past it. And no matter how many other, like, stable relationships she tries to form, she can't let Archer go. She keeps coming back to him, knowing how toxic he is, knowing that she's going to be miserable. She can't stop going back to him.
I would almost pull a line from Brokeback Mountain. Why can't I quit you?
She can't quit him. She keeps trying. If he's in a coma, she can quit him. Otherwise, she can't.
And that is an interesting thing that goes back and forth in that. But I guess, would you say the overarching theme?
It's similar to. It's kind of like Venture Brothers. It's not about failure in a civilizational sense. It's not about the failure of society to build that utopia that we were promised. We were promised jetpacks, and we didn't get jetpacks. Archer, it's more. I think the theme is that you can't ever really get rid of the past.
That's true.
It's that Faulkner line. The past isn't dead. It's not even past.
Right.
Because who's Archer's dad? Why can't we get past this? Why can't we get past the Cold War? There was that episode in, like, season 6 where they were all, like, doing grunt jobs for the CIA, and Christian Slater played that character who had a mononym, and I forget what his name was.
Slater.
Was it Slater? Was it that obvious?
Probably.
I think it was.
It's a mononym, and they kept saying that. That was a running gag. And they meet Lana's parents, who are both brilliant scientists, and they've discovered a method of basically making free energy, from algae or something like that. And CIA wants to shut it down. And they're like, "Why do you want to do this, Slater?" And Slater's like, "Yeah, those Middle Eastern countries that are full of chaos and war and murder? Imagine what they're going to be like when nobody wants their oil anymore."
Right.
So, like, even if you have the means of getting past the past, you cannot. There's no way to let go of the past. You have to carry it with you. Sterling will always have to carry Mallory around with him. And everyone else will have to carry around what Mallory did to Sterling as a child, because that informs him as a character. And, everybody's carrying their bag, and they can't ever put their bag down.
So that brings to me an interesting saying. I like to occasionally say it sometimes when I'm giving people advice they never asked for.
Right.
And that is, it's something that one of my own parents used to say, and that is, shame on my parents for what they did to me, but shame on myself for what I continue to do to myself. And in Sterling's case, his mother's still not done doing to him what she's done to him in his development and in the misfortune of his life.
Right, and that's all informed by, who Mallory Archer is and what happened to her.
Yeah.
Right.
She joined OSS during the war. Don't worry about the timeline in Archer. Just let it go. And then, 2 weeks later, I was in Tunisia killing a man. Again, this profession, it does not attract people who are normal and healthy. And Mallory Archer is not normal and healthy. So why would she have been a normal and healthy mother raising a normal and healthy son
without
a dad? There's no reason to expect anything from her.
The closest thing Sterling ever had to her dad was Woodhouse. And look how he abused him.
Right, because Woodhouse wasn't really his dad.
No.
So he could. He was. It's. But it never goes full sociopathic. Like they know exactly where the line is, and they never cross it.
You never go full sociopath.
Yeah, like. Just when you think Archer is completely nihilistic and cares about nothing, he's suddenly able to do some small piece of charity, like the terms of enrampagement, where he goes on a mad rampage on behalf of some nice old lady that he had cancer with, who was being denied her cancer medication, and he liked her, and she was nice. You know, he was a mother figure that he would have gladly have fought for. So he's capable of being human, and so is Mallory Archer, because she spends 3 years waiting for him to get out of a coma. She does care. She doesn't know how to show it. She doesn't know how to act it correctly, but she does care.
You know, and I think that they do a little armchair philosophy, psychology, whatever you want to call it, wankery. Heaven forbid. But
Heaven forbid.
Is within more probably I guess we're the same generation, but definitely in my generation, one of the big stumbling blocks, which I'm not gonna say millennials have it in hand, but they certainly have a better grip on, is your emotions, dealing with them, and how do you express them appropriately.
Yeah,
that is not a simple thing for Generation X.
No, I don't think it's simple for anybody.
It's not simple for anyone, but in some ways, in the ways that we were brought up, it was less allowable. Well, at least in the time period. I mean, the 80s, 70s and the 80s. You know,
we came up in a time of great decadence, and that kind of like worked.
But also in a time of the great fear of the gay.
Well, fear of a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think,
you know, the fear of, don't do that. You might be effeminate if you do that, and if you're effeminate, then you might, you know.
I don't think that was. I think that was there, but that was also something that existed before us. I think.
Yeah, it definitely existed before us. I think maybe we might be the last generation in which that is a thing. Who knows?
Who knows? I don't like to make predictions about the future when we're talking about a show that's shows that are both about failure.
Well,
and inability to grow past the past.
I mean, what I would say is, I think what is considered the appropriate way to express your feelings or to express yourself as a moving target. You know, it's not static. It's something that gradually shifts and changes over time.
Yes, I agree.
So, so for what was, appropriate for a 10-year-old when we were 10 years old is very different from what is appropriate for a 10-year-old now.
That's true. Yeah.
There's very different times. Are they better? Are they worse? Who can say?
I don't know.
I can't.
There are ways in which it's better, and there are ways in which it's not.
I am a bright enough man, but I am by no means, I'd say, a genius. But I am self-aware. And I am self-aware enough to say that I cannot make that ultimate judgment. I am not qualified.
No.
And one might wonder, with both Archer and the Venture Brothers, what it says about the generation it is nostalgia for.
That's a wonderful question. Because nostalgia has become so frustratingly obligatory.
And monetized.
It's monetized, and it's the only thing that seems to be able to be monetized. You can comment on the stuck culture, in which there's really been nothing new since, like, the middle of the last decade, culturally speaking.
I can watch new versions of a cartoon I watched when I was a child.
But because the millennial generation has greater demographic weight, they're nostalgic for different things. Like, they remember the 80s as a time of innocence, which I find hilarious.
I remember it
because I was old enough to know better. You know, we remember what the 80s were really like, and it's watching Stranger Things. It's kind of weird, because it's all very rose-colored glasses. It's like, no, the 80s was a lot dirtier than that.
Yeah.
Where are the cigarette butts and the broken beer bottles on the side of every sidewalk? Like,
yeah,
that's what where I don't see that.
Where's the breaking to electric boogaloo? I mean,
yeah, I would say. Well, we pretty much established what Venture Brothers is nostalgic for, and it's really a commentary on what was promised and what did not come to be.
Sure.
And I think the through line in Archer is not really nostalgia. It's really just an exploration of all the ways in which the world was broken and is broken before you get here.
You know, I was thinking when you were talking about the sanitization of the 80s. Like, people think of the 80s and they think neon magenta and neon blue and bright colors and that kind of thing. And they kind of forget some of the grimy stuff that, even in movies, like the first Terminator, very grimy movie.
Yeah.
Highlander, very grimy movie. RoboCop, exceedingly grimy movie.
Yeah, that was that was what the 80s was, when the 80s was commenting on itself, right? That's what was current at the time. It all looked like Repo Man.
Yeah.
Yeah? It was all very informed by punk and cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
Or The Hidden.
Yeah.
That movie. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
No, I do remember that one. Well, and I think that there was a certain amount of, I guess, like, people thought maybe the apocalypse really was going to happen in the 80s, you know? I mean, it was the height of the Cold, you know, it was towards the end of the Cold War, but we didn't know that it was the end of the Cold, you know, getting close to the end of the Cold War until it was really over, you know? So, and by that point, it had been going on for 40 or 50 years.
Right.
You know,
we thought it would go on forever.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there was no signs that it was going to let up. Like, you know, there was the issue with CFCs and the atmosphere, you know, and, you know, people started to first sort of grapple with the fact that, like, hey, maybe this planet isn't going to last forever. You know, maybe this, you know, nuclear holocaust is going to happen. Like, there was some pretty apocalyptic through lines in a lot of media in the 1980s.
And it was just normal to comment on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People didn't think there was nothing controversial about making a movie like War Games.
I mean,
in which the computers were going to blow up the world because it didn't understand what was happening.
Right. The distinction between
Interesting, a game in which no one wins.
A game in which no one wins, yeah. And I think that's kind of like no one winning is kind of like the line in both of these shows. Played for laughs, but it informs a generation in which and comes from the mindset of a generation in which no one really wins. There is not one who is righteous, not one.
I think
Generation X is very Calvinistic
in
its theology. We are all sinners in the hands of an angry God.
We come from, you know, it comes from this. We come from the desire to believe in this utopia future, but have the cynical belief we're going to get Mad Max.
Yeah. Yeah,
that is
again another perfectly normal thing. That was like, of course.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, Mad Max is a great example. Like, all of the Mad Max movies were basically like, this is the logical outcome of what's happening now. This is the future.
And yet, we got a slightly different future.
We did, yeah.
Yeah,
we did.
You know, the Cold War actually did end.
It did,
and it ended without a shot being fired in anger, which is mind blowing when you think about it.
It ended with a lot less radiation than we thought we were going to have.
Hell yeah! And we're still kind of dealing with how that works. And I think that was 30 years ago?
I was, as a child, very haunted by that movie that came out the day after, you know, the whole nuclear holocaust stuff.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, that kind of shit when I was a child, or, a teenager and all that, was fucked with me deeply.
Sure.
To the extent of that, I never really believed that there was to be a future for everyone. Like we're all gonna die.
We're all gonna die.
I live in 12 overlapping target zones for the Russians. I'm kind of fucked no matter what happens.
Right, and then it didn't happen.
And then it didn't happen. You're like, well, how do I now live in a future that I actually am alive for? That's
And I think instead, I think we. The way that it ended suggested that, and this is a very idea that was very current in the 90s, the idea that history had come to an end. And that we were again going to get a different kind of utopia, and instead, the story of this century has been that no, history's going to keep going. There are going to be wars. There are going to be plagues.
Yep.
There are going to be great powers again. There are great powers again, and there's the great game. Like a few last year, I was watching movies on Netflix, and I saw this movie called Black 47, which is a movie about the potato famine in Ireland, and it's pretty much like a very nicely focused revenge story that kind of like uses the plot of a typical revenge potboiler to explain how the potato famine, how the Great Hunger occurred in Ireland. So it's a great movie to check out, Black 47. And but the reason I bring it up is because the main character is a Irishman who served with the British Army in Afghanistan. Because in the 1840s, the British and the Russians were playing for Afghanistan. Because that's a place situated nicely at the confluence of trade routes. It was true in the time of Alexander the Great. It was true in the 19th century, and it's still true. So history never does end. And kind of like what I was saying about Archer, like we really can't escape that past. What has been done will inform where we are now, and we will be forced to make decisions based on how we got here.
And
exactly.
And to put a nice little comment on that, the great one of the great truisms: those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it.
And and I think that's always true. And even those who don't ignore history are sometimes can't escape it. I think that's what. Even if you understand the way everything is wrong, and I think everyone on Archer, or at least understands why everything is wrong, they can't really seem to do anything about it.
Yeah.
They can do no better than just like give each other the grace to keep going, which is where the show finds its humanity. Man, we have gotten philosophical this episode. We have done.
What happens if we go more than a month between episodes, man? Our brains start overrunning.
How have we been this philosophical talking about two Adult Swim shows? Like, that's amazing. We've done well for ourselves.
We have, but I think that we also have pretty fertile ground to which to grow these ideas in. Like, the people behind both of these shows are by no means dummies.
No, they're very smart.
Are trying to comment, Now, what that specific comment is, they sometimes outright state, but there's also room for interpretation, like with really any media.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing I remember from when I was in school for learning literature in lit class. The big question whenever you'd write an essay on a work you had read is, what is your takeaway from it? What is your takeaway from it? Support how you got that takeaway from it. But the question was almost never, and maybe I just had a very good teacher, what do you think the artist intended? It's, what did you take from this? And support what you took from this by the text of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a better question than, what do you think the artist meant?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think that's all art. There's what the artist intends, and then there's what people take from it.
They don't always match up.
They don't always match up. And sometimes you can, by accident, create a greater story than you were ever intending.
Right. I think, and creating any story, you it always does things that you don't expect. Like, the story takes on a life of its own. Like, you might not intend to start one thing, but the logic of the decisions that you've earlier made with characters and plot start imposing themselves, and they start taking you in directions you didn't anticipate.
I've heard of many examples where a writer has talked about, well, I originally intended this for the novel, but the character had different ideas.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Like, Tarantino didn't intend to write Mr. Orange and Mr. White as, like, this, like, almost father-son character bond, but when he started writing them, that's what they did.
Right.
And that was based on decisions that he made as a creator. So I don't like the postmodern hot takes where they say the author is dead. I think that's deeply simplistic. But, like, the author is not always the absolute lord and master over what happens. And what the audience takes from it is in its way entirely as valid as what the author intended. I mean, like finding balance for both.
I think there is something to be said for that. I am not a fan of the author is dead either myself, because people to go into writing some with authorial intent.
Yeah, it exists. It's real.
Like, you'd never get a story done if you didn't have intent or an idea of what you were trying to do.
I think it's one of those Mott and Bailey things where it's like it's a simplistic expression of a really complicated idea that instead they use a catchphrase.
Right.
And the catchphrase creates as many problems as it solves because it's simplistic.
Yeah.
No, I think whoever said the author is dead didn't really mean that. It was like when Nietzsche said God is dead. He didn't mean that. He meant something else, but it became the catchphrase.
Yeah. No, it's when you try to, when you try to distill a really complex idea down into one pithy statement, unless you're extremely skilled, you're gonna end up losing or confusing people.
Thus the importance of phrasing.
Phrasing!
Ba-dum-bum. That's not my best bring around, but it'll have to do.
It'll work. I mean, but and a lot of things we cover on this podcast, but because generally we don't cover things we don't like.
No. What would be the point?
What would is one of the things I see that comes back around to us time and time again is the importance of storytelling.
Yeah, and craftsmanship.
The importance of the story, like. I know that we say that our catchphrase for the podcast is a serious podcast about unimportant things.
That is the catchphrase.
Which is, pretty funny.
I think so. I like it.
I know, I have no problem with it at all.
I came up with it, Karen. What's your problem, man?
I don't know. The author is dead. I guess that's what I
you got me. You got me. What are you trying to say before I hijacked you, like I always do?
But what I think it is, what our podcast really, at least since my involvement is about, is the importance of art and storytelling to the human condition.
Yes.
Because that's almost always an element, if not stated that directly, something that we allude to on some level or another.
No, I agree.
I think that's really the core of it, is what it comes down to. Don't change the catchphrase. It's perfect.
I'm not going to.
But that I think is the spirit of the thing.
Right. We talk about these things. They're in and of themselves unimportant. I mean, we're talking about a show that's on Adult Swim and a show that's on FX, for God's sakes. But in analyzing them as art, we discover things about human condition and can have conversations about it. And that's because they were made by smart people, but they also were made by smart people who wanted to also create entertainments. And the reason it's worth talking about unimportant things seriously is because they're all humans making efforts to do human things and say something about humanity.
Exactly.
We are so goddamn deep.
I think it has to do with being quarantined for a year, man.
Quarantine.
You get to look at your navel an awful damn lot. let me tell
Yeah. Behold a pale horse, and he that sat upon him was death, and hell followed with him.
you. Behold a pale belly, and that what?
I keep thinking that plague is one of the horses of the apocalypse, but it's not. There's no plague horse. It's conquest, war, famine, and death. Yeah. Yeah, conquest, war, famine, and death. There's no plague horse. I don't know. I think they associated the plague horse with the Black Death in the 14th century. Because why would they not?
I mean, kind of topical.
Yep. So where are we now?
Well,
Aside from still in quarantine.
I believe that you had issued at the beginning of this a challenge to me.
I did.
I had said, they are like onto Greek tragedies, and you said, well, you are going to need to back that, sir. And I said,
I do.
And I shall.
I don't know if you need to anymore, Kieran. I think I could probably do it for you, but go ahead.
You probably could, but I'm going to make it very simple, in fact. The basis of the Greek tragedy, unequivocally, is the sin of hubris.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, both Sterling Archer and most of the rest of his friends, family, and colleagues, as well as Thaddeus Rusty Venture and his colleagues, are all guilty of great hubris.
Yeah. Or if he's not himself guilty of hubris, he is certainly the inheritor of hubris.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could probably say that Jonas Venture was the hubristic one, but it still applies. I concede. You have made your point, and also the inability to escape the past, which is
exactly.
That's Oedipus right there. Or
that's the Antigone, which came after
Antigone,
it.
which is even more like you can't escape the past. Like all Antigone wanted to do was bury her brother.
Nope. Can't do it because.
And why was her brother even dead? Because we can't escape the past. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. You're right. This is Greek tragedy. Well done. I concede. And therefore Kieran wins, and therefore Kieran has to host the next podcast, and we have to buy him beer. This is all in the bylaws, by the way.
Oh, all right. Well, as long as it's in the bylaws, sure.
You've seen the bylaws, right? I've sent them to you, right?
Yeah. I had my attorney go over it. It's looked fine. It's fine.
Fine.
Totally fine. Yeah.
Dude, your attorney is an imaginary ferret.
That doesn't mean he doesn't have a law license, Kieran.
Look, he passed the bar, okay?
Yeah.
The ferret bar.
It counts, man. It's a bar. All right. So, shall we stick a fork in this, boys?
I think so.
I think we've got this pretty concisely. I think this episode we said more with less, actually.
Well, we're still at like the 99-minute mark, so
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we say anything concisely, but I think we did what we needed to do. Yeah.
Well, that's because we're a bunch of talky, over-cantankerous, pseudo-intellectuals. What do you want, man?
Pseudo? How dare you, sir? How dare you? All right, so this has been Episode 10 of Shallow and Pedantic. I am Andrew.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Kieran.
Thank y'all for stopping by. We will catch you next month, probably.